Sign here, Leo, then get out of my sight. My hands trembled as I stared at the divorce papers spread across the marble counter. Damien stood before me, his expression carved from ice and contempt. There was no trace of the man who had once slipped a wedding ring onto my finger, not that he'd ever truly cared. Our marriage had been a transaction, nothing more. But now, with my family's business empire crumbling into bankruptcy, overnight amid fraud allegations splashed across every news channel, I had become a liability he could no longer afford. Damien, if you just listen, I started. He raised his hand sharply, cutting me off mid-sentence. I don't want to hear another word from you. Your family has destroyed my reputation. Do you understand what that means? Every investor, every business partner is questioning my judgment because I'm married into your mess. I need to distance myself from this disaster immediately. The rejection stabbed through my chest like shattered glass. My Omega instinct screamed at me to submit, to beg, to make my alpha reconsider. But the truth was brutally clear in his cold blue eyes. He had never loved me, and he never would. I was simply collateral damage in my family's downfall. My hand moved almost mechanically, picking up the expensive pen he'd placed beside the papers. Each signature felt like cutting another tie to the life I'd known. What Damien didn't know, what I couldn't tell him, was that I carried a secret inside me. 2 months pregnant. I discovered it 3 weeks ago, sitting alone in our penthouse bathroom, staring at the positive test with a mixture of terror and wonder. If I told him now, everything would become infinitely worse. Damien would use the child as leverage, as punishment. He'd fight for custody not out of love, but out of spite, just to watch me suffer. So I kept silent, signing away our marriage while protecting the tiny life growing within me. When I finished, Damien snatched the papers without a word and walked away, already on his phone making calls. I gathered my things, a small backpack with a few clothes, my phone, some cash I'd managed to save. Everything else in this penthouse belonged to him, and he'd made it clear I had no claim to any of it. The elevator ride down felt endless. I watched the numbers descend, each floor taking me further from the gilded cage I'd inhabited for 2 years. When I stepped onto the street, the late afternoon sun felt harsh against my skin. I had nowhere to go. My parents had fled the country to avoid prosecution. My so-called friends had vanished the moment scandal touched our name. I stood completely alone. I wandered through the city streets for hours, my mind racing through impossible options. Shelters? I had some pride left. Hotels? My limited funds wouldn't last more than a few days. I needed something more permanent, more secure, especially with a baby coming. That's when a name surfaced in my thoughts. Dangerous and forbidden. Roman Vance, Damien's uncle. Though only 5 years older than my ex-husband, the man was a legend in the underground, a mafia lord who controlled half the city's illegal operations from the shadows. Even Damien, with all his corporate power and wealth, feared his uncle. I'd met Roaming exactly once, at a high-profile business gala 6 months ago. He'd been standing apart from the crowd, a glass of whiskey in his hand, watching everything with those piercing green eyes. When our gazes had met across the room, something electric had passed between us. His stare had been so intense, so predatory, that I'd felt my breath catch. Damien had noticed and immediately steered me away, his grip on my arm bruising. Later, he'd warned me to never speak to Roaming, to never even look in his direction. The fear in Damien's voice had been palpable. Now, desperate and pregnant with nowhere else to turn, Roaming Vance seemed like my only option. It was insane, walking into a lion's den asking for shelter. But I was out of choices. I found his private establishment tucked away in the warehouse district, a speakeasy-style bar called The Vault that only the city's elite and dangerous knew about. 2 massive bouncers stood guard at the unmarked entrance. When I approached, they immediately blocked my path. "This is a members-only establishment," one of them said, his voice gruff. I need to see Roman Vance. I forced confidence into my voice despite my exhaustion. Tell him Leo Hart is here. The bouncers exchanged glances. One pulled out a phone and made a brief call, speaking too quietly for me to hear. After a moment, he nodded and stepped aside. Go ahead. The interior was dimly lit with amber lighting that cast everything in warm shadows. Jazz music played softly from hidden speakers, and the air was thick with expensive cigar smoke and whispered conversations. Everything screamed power and exclusivity. My Omega senses immediately went on high alert. This was alpha territory, dangerous and intoxicating. Then I saw him. Roman Vance sat in a corner booth like a king on his throne. A black leather jacket stretched across broad shoulders, a lit cigarette balanced between his fingers. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and those green eyes, sharp as broken glass, found me instantly. A slow, predatory smirk curved his lips. Wow. His voice was deep and rough, like whiskey and smoke. Damien's discarded little Omega. What brings you to my doorstep, Leo? My heart slammed against my rib cage. His presence was overwhelming, filling the space between us with an intensity that made breathing difficult. This was a man who commanded fear and respect with a glance, who built an empire in the shadows while people like Damien played at power in boardrooms. I forced myself to move forward, to close the distance between us, even as every instinct warned me to run. When I reached his booth, those green eyes traveled slowly over me, assessing, calculating, seeing far more than I wanted to reveal. I need your help, I said quietly, aware that several other patrons were watching us with unveiled curiosity. Romain took a long drag from his cigarette, then gestured to the seat across from him. Sit down, Omega. Let's hear what desperation brought you to me. I slid into the booth, setting my backpack beside me. Up close, his scent hit me like a physical force. Gunpowder and leather, pine and something darker, more primal. Pure dominant alpha pheromones that made my Omega biology respond despite my fear. You've got exactly 5 minutes to convince me why I shouldn't throw you back out onto the street, Roman said, his tone casual, but his eyes deadly serious. Start talking. This was it, my one chance to secure safety for myself and my unborn child. I took a deep breath and began. I can give you something valuable, I said, keeping my voice low so nearby patrons wouldn't overhear. Complete access to Damien's business secrets, his illegal offshore accounts, the shell companies he uses to hide assets, his deals with competitors that violate non-compete agreements. I've spent 2 years as his spouse, and I've seen everything. He thought I was too naive to understand. Roman's expression didn't change, but I noticed his fingers had stopped drumming on the table. He was listening. Why would I need information about my nephew's petty corporate games? He asked, though something in his tone suggested genuine interest beneath the dismissal. Because you hate him. I was blunt. Everyone knows there's bad blood between you two, even if nobody knows why. This isn't about needing the information. It's about what you could do with it. Destroy his reputation completely. Take apart his empire piece by piece while he watches helplessly. A slow smile spread across Roman's face, sharp and dangerous as a knife's edge. You're more observant than I gave you credit for. But you still haven't told me what you want in return for this alleged treasure trove of secrets. I met his gaze directly, refusing to look away despite how much it unnerved me. Protection, a place to stay. Damien divorced me today and threw me out with nothing. My family is gone. My resources are frozen in legal battles, and I have nowhere else to turn. Shelters exist, Roman pointed out, taking another drag from his cigarette. I'm pregnant. The words escaped before I could stop them, shocking us both. I hadn't meant to reveal that card so quickly, but exhaustion and desperation had loosened my tongue. Roman's eyes widened fractionally, the first genuine surprise I'd seen from him. Does Damien know? No, and he never will if I can help it. He'd use the child as a weapon against me, fight for custody purely out of vindictiveness. I need somewhere safe until I can figure out my next move, and I'm offering you valuable intelligence in exchange. Roman leaned back in his seat, studying me with renewed interest. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken implications. Finally, he stubbed out his cigarette in the crystal ashtray. You're asking me to take in my nephew's pregnant ex-spouse, hide you from him, and potentially start a war over information that may or may not be worth the trouble. That's a hell of an ask, Leo. I know. I swallowed hard. But I'm betting you've wanted an excuse to destroy Damien for years. I'm handing you that excuse on a silver platter. Something flickered in Roman's eyes. Approval, maybe, or respect for my boldness. He reached across the table suddenly, his hand closing around my wrist before I could react. His grip was firm but not painful, his thumb pressing against my pulse point in a gesture that felt both threatening and intimate. If you're lying to me, he said softly, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. If this is some scheme Damien cooked up to infiltrate my operations, I will make you regret ever speaking my name. Do you understand? My pulse hammered beneath his touch. I understand, but I'm not lying. I'm desperate, and desperate people don't have the luxury of deception. Roman held my gaze for another long moment, then released my wrist. All right, Leo, I'll accept your deal, but with conditions. What conditions? You live in my home, under my roof, following my rules. You don't leave without my permission. You don't contact anyone from your old life. And you don't make any moves without clearing them with me first. He leaned back, his expression unreadable. You're essentially under my protection, which means you're also under my control. And you give me everything you have on Damien. Every password, every file, every dirty secret you've collected. The terms were harsh, bordering on imprisonment. But what choice did I have? At least under Roman's protection, my child would be safe. Damien wouldn't dare cross his uncle directly, no matter how angry the divorce made him. How long do I have to stay? I asked carefully. Until I've dismantled everything Damien has built. Until he's broken and powerless. Only then will you be truly safe from his retaliation. I swallowed hard, considering the implications. This wasn't just shelter. It was becoming part of Roman's revenge scheme against Damien. But maybe that was exactly what I needed. If Damien was destroyed, he couldn't hurt me or my baby ever again. I accept your terms, I said finally. Roman extended his hand across the table. When I shook it, that same electric current I felt at the gala 6 months ago jolted through me. His hand was warm and calloused, his grip confident. For just a moment, his expression softened almost imperceptibly, and I wondered if he felt it too. That inexplicable connection that had nothing to do with deals or revenge. But the moment passed quickly. Roman stood, towering over the booth, and gestured for me to follow. Come on, my car is out back. I grabbed my backpack and followed him through the bar, acutely aware of the eyes tracking our movement. Roman Vance didn't entertain guests often, and certainly not Omega ones who looked as bedraggled as I did. We exited through a private rear door that led to a secured parking area. His vehicle was a matte black SUV with tinted windows and reinforced panels, clearly bulletproof. A driver stood waiting beside it, opening the rear door as we approached. Roman gestured for me to get in first. The interior was luxurious, leather and dark wood, smelling of his scent and expensive cologne. Roman settled beside me, maintaining a careful distance but still close enough that I could feel his body heat. The driver closed our door and took his position up front, separated from us by a privacy screen. As we pulled out onto the street, heading toward the city's outskirts, Roman pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly. He didn't speak to me, didn't acknowledge my presence beyond that initial gesture to enter the vehicle. I stared out the window, watching the familiar cityscape give way to less populated areas. then eventually to the wealthy estates outside city limits. My hand drifted unconsciously to my stomach, still flat, but harboring a secret that would change everything. I'd just made a deal with one dangerous alpha to escape another. I traded one form of captivity for another, though hopefully this one came with actual protection rather than contempt. The SUV turned onto a private road, and through the darkening evening, I caught my first glimpse of Roming's estate. Massive gates, high walls, security cameras visible even from a distance. This wasn't just a home, it was a fortress. My new prison, or my new sanctuary. Only time would tell which. The gates opened smoothly as we approached, revealing a long driveway lined with mature trees and strategic lighting. The estate itself came into view gradually, a modern architectural masterpiece of glass, steel, and dark stone that managed to look both elegant and impenetrable. Everything about it screamed controlled power, much like the man who owned it. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor," Roming said quietly as the SUV pulled up to the main entrance. "Your home for the foreseeable future." Guards were stationed at various points around the property, professional and alert. As we exited the vehicle, one of them approached Roming with a tablet, speaking in low tones about security updates. I stood awkwardly to the side with my pathetic backpack, feeling entirely out of place in this world of wealth and danger. When Roming finished his conversation, he turned to me. "Follow me. I'll show you where you'll be staying." The interior matched the exterior's aesthetic, minimalist modern design with clean lines, expensive materials, and a color palette dominated by blacks, grays, and whites. Everything was immaculate and felt cold, despite its obvious luxury. We took a wide staircase to the second floor, our footsteps echoing in the spacious hallway. Roming stopped at a door near the middle of the corridor and pushed it open. "This is your room. Bathroom through that door, closet to the left. I'll have some clothes brought up for you tomorrow, since you clearly didn't pack much." I stepped inside to find a bedroom roughly the size of the entire apartment I'd grown up in. A king-sized bed dominated one wall, dressed in white linens. Large windows offered a view of the estate grounds, though I noticed they had security bars cleverly integrated into the design. Comfortable prison, indeed. "Don't try to leave the property without informing me first," Roming continued, his tone matter of fact. "The guards have orders to detain anyone attempting unauthorized exit. For your safety, of course." "Of course," I echoed, setting my backpack down on a pristine armchair. "Get some rest. We'll discuss the specifics of our arrangement tomorrow morning. Breakfast is at 8 sharp." He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "And Leo, don't make me regret this decision." Then he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him with a finality that made my chest tighten. I was alone in a stranger's home, pregnant with my ex-husband's child, having just bargained away my freedom to his dangerous uncle. The weight of my choices crashed over me, and I sank onto the edge of the bed, fighting back tears I refused to shed. Sleep eluded me that night despite the comfortable bed. My mind raced through everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. The divorce, the desperate walk through the city, the deal with Roming. I kept unconsciously touching my still flat stomach, talking silently to the tiny life inside me. "I promised you I'd keep you safe, no matter what it takes." Morning came too quickly. I showered and changed into the least wrinkled clothes from my backpack, then made my way downstairs, following the sound of activity. The dining room was easy to find, a long glass table set for two, with Roming already seated at the head, dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. He glanced up when I entered, those green eyes assessing me briefly before returning to his phone. "Sit." I took the seat to his right, trying not to feel intimidated by the spread of food laid out. Fresh fruit, pastries, eggs, various breakfast meats. The smell hit me immediately, and my stomach lurched with unexpected nausea. Morning sickness. I'd experienced it mildly over the past few weeks, but the rich aromas here intensified it significantly. "You're not eating," Romang observed, setting his phone aside. "I'm not particularly hungry right now," I managed, trying to breathe through my nose without making it obvious. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You look pale. Are you just tired?" "I didn't sleep well. New environment." It wasn't entirely a lie, though it conveniently omitted the pregnancy symptoms, making everything worse. Romang studied me for a long moment, and I had the uncomfortable feeling he could see right through my deflection. But he didn't press the issue, instead changing the subject. "I need those access codes to Damien's accounts today. The sooner I start dismantling his empire, the better." "The information isn't stored anywhere physical," I said, grateful for the distraction from food. "Everything is in cloud storage, protected by multiple security layers. I know the passwords and authentication methods, but I'll need a secure computer to access it all. I have a private office with encrypted systems. We'll handle it after breakfast." He paused, then added, "Or after you've at least attempted to eat something. You look like you're about to faint." There was an edge of concern in his voice that surprised me. I reached for a plain piece of toast, figuring that might stay down better than anything else. Romang watched me take a few small bites before seeming satisfied enough to return his attention to his own meal. 2 hours later, I sat in Romang's home office, a room that looked like something from a spy thriller, with multiple monitors, sophisticated security equipment, and what appeared to be a weapons cabinet cleverly disguised as a bookshelf. He provided me with a laptop that had more security features than most government computers. As I logged into Damien's cloud accounts, my fingers flew across the keyboard with practiced ease. Romang stood behind me, watching the screen over my shoulder. His proximity made me nervous, his scent distracting, but I forced myself to focus on the task. "These offshore accounts," Romang murmured as I pulled up the first set of files. "How long has he been siphoning money into them?" "Since before we got married. I discovered them about 6 months into our relationship, when I accidentally saw an email notification on his phone." "And you never confronted him? Would it have made a difference?" "Our marriage was arranged between families for business purposes. Love and honesty were never part of the equation." Bitterness crept into my voice despite my efforts to stay neutral. I felt, rather than saw, Romang's reaction, a slight tension in his posture, maybe surprise at my candor. His hand came to rest on the back of my chair, not touching me, but close enough to make me hyper-aware of his presence. "Keep going," he instructed. "I want everything. Transaction records, contact lists, communication logs. All of it." We worked for hours, extracting data while Romang made notes and occasional phone calls to people I assumed were his various associates. The information painted a damning picture of Damien's business practices, fraud, embezzlement, illegal partnerships with companies under federal investigation, more than enough to destroy him completely. "This is excellent work, Leo," Romang said finally, genuine satisfaction in his voice. "With this, I can dismantle everything he's built within months." I transferred everything to an encrypted flash drive and handed it to him. "That's everything I have access to. Use it however you want." Romang pocketed the drive, then turned his full attention to me for the first time since we'd started. "You've held up your end of our bargain admirably. Now comes the harder part. Actually living under my roof, following my rules, and staying hidden while I execute my plans." "I understand the terms," I replied, though anxiety twisted in my gut. "Do you?" He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. "Because you're still hiding something from me, Leo. I can sense it, and I don't appreciate secrets under my own roof." My heart rate spiked. Could he somehow know about the pregnancy already? "I don't know what you mean. You will tell me eventually." Romang's voice was quiet with certainty. "Everyone does. For now, though, I'll let it slide. You've earned that much trust." He stepped back, giving me space to breathe again. "Go rest. Tomorrow, we start establishing your new routine here. As I left his office and made my way back to my assigned room, I couldn't shake the feeling that my secret wouldn't stay hidden much longer. Roman Vance was too observant, too intelligent, and too invested in controlling everything within his domain. The question wasn't if he'd discover my pregnancy, but when, and what he'd do about it once he knew. The following week brought significant changes to the estate's atmosphere. I began noticing increased activity around Roming's office. Men in expensive suits arriving at odd hours, hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when I passed by, and a palpable tension that seemed to electrify the air. Roming was making his move against Damien, and I was both fascinated and terrified by the precision of his strategy. One afternoon, while passing by his study, I overheard fragments of a conversation that made my blood run cold. Roming was speaking to someone about Damien's primary investors, discussing leverage points and potential scandals that could be strategically leaked to the press. The calculated coldness in his voice reminded me exactly who I was living with. Not just a protector, but a predator. Meanwhile, my pregnancy symptoms intensified with each passing day. The morning sickness that had been manageable now struck without warning at various times. I'd wake up dizzy, spend afternoons fighting waves of nausea, experience sudden food aversions that made mealtimes increasingly difficult to navigate. My body was changing in subtle ways, a slight rounding of my abdomen that I tried to hide with loose clothing, heightened sensitivity to smells, and an exhaustion that no amount of sleep seemed to cure. I did my best to conceal these symptoms, but Roming's household staff weren't blind. I caught the housekeeper, Mrs. Chun, watching me with knowing eyes when I rushed from the breakfast table one morning. The chef began automatically preparing bland foods alongside the regular menu. They knew, even if they said nothing. The crisis came on a Tuesday morning. I'd been in the bathroom for nearly 20 minutes dealing with a particularly brutal bout of morning sickness when I finally emerged to find Roming standing in the hallway outside my room. His arms were crossed over his chest, his expression thunderous. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. Now, my heart sank. "About what?" "Don't insult my intelligence, Leo. You're sick every morning. You barely eat. You're constantly fatigued, and you flinch whenever anyone gets near your midsection." He stepped closer, his green eyes blazing. "I've been patient, waiting for you to trust me enough to be honest. But that patience has run out. You're seeing a doctor today. This isn't negotiable." The authority in his voice left no room for argument. "I don't need a doctor," I protested weakly. "I'm just adjusting to the stress." "Enough." He moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "I protect what's mine, Leo. That includes ensuring you're healthy and safe. You can either cooperate willingly, or I'll have my security team escort you to the clinic. Your choice." Looking into his determined face, I realized resistance was futile. He would find out eventually anyway. "Fine. I'll go." "Good. We'll leave in 30 minutes." The private medical facility Roming took me to was nothing like a regular hospital. Located in an unmarked building downtown, it catered exclusively to clients who valued discretion above all else. The doctor who examined me was professional and thorough, asking questions I answered reluctantly while Roming waited outside. When the examination concluded, the doctor smiled warmly. "Congratulations, Mr. Hart. You're approximately 10 to 11 weeks pregnant. Everything appears healthy and progressing normally, though you'll need to start proper prenatal care immediately." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. My face must have gone pale because the doctor immediately offered me water and asked if I needed to sit down. Through the fog of panic, I heard her mention vitamins, dietary recommendations, and follow-up appointments. She left to prepare my paperwork, and silence descended over the examination room. I sat on the medical table, my hands trembling, waiting for Roming's inevitable reaction. The door opened, and he entered slowly, closing it behind him with deliberate care. Pregnant. His voice was flat, emotionless, which somehow felt worse than anger. You've been pregnant this entire time? Yes. There was no point denying it now. Damien's child? I nodded, unable to meet his eyes. I found out 3 weeks before the divorce. I never told him because I knew he'd weaponize it against me. Romang was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed this information. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the white-knuckled grip he had on his self-control. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously soft. Why didn't you tell me? When you came to me asking for protection, why keep this secret? Tears burned my eyes. Because I thought you'd turn me away. Who would willingly shelter their nephew's pregnant ex-spouse? It complicated everything, and I was terrified you'd see me as too much trouble and send me back out into the streets. He moved closer, and I instinctively tensed. But instead of violence or rejection, his hand came up to grip my chin gently, forcing me to look at him. Do you think so little of me that I would abandon a pregnant Omega who came to me for help? I didn't know what to think. I still don't know you, not really. You're dangerous, powerful, and you took me in primarily to get revenge on Damien. Where exactly does a pregnancy fit into that equation? His grip loosened, and something shifted in his expression, frustration giving way to something I couldn't quite identify. Get dressed. We're leaving. The drive back to the estate was suffocatingly silent. Romang stared out the window, his jaw tight, while I sat as far from him as the SUV's interior allowed. My mind raced through possibilities. Would he void our agreement? Demand I leave? Use the pregnancy as additional leverage against Damien? When we arrived home, he walked me directly to my room without a word, then disappeared into his office, slamming the door hard enough to echo through the hallway. I collapsed on my bed, emotionally drained and terrified about what would happen next. Hours passed. Sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple outside my window. I'd resigned myself to packing my meager belongings when a knock sounded at my door. Romang entered, carrying a pharmacy bag and a folder. His expression was unreadable as he set both items on my dresser. Prenatal vitamins, he said curtly, indicating the bag. Take them daily. The folder contains a meal plan the doctor recommended. The chef has already been briefed and will prepare everything you need starting tomorrow. I stared at him in shock. You're not sending me away? He looked at me like I'd said something incomprehensible. Why would I do that? You came to me for protection. You need it now more than ever. Both of you do. His eyes flickered briefly to my still flat stomach. The child is part of you, which means it falls under the same protection I've already promised. Relief flooded through me so powerfully that tears streamed down my cheeks before I could stop them. I never expected. I thought surely. You thought wrong. His voice softened fractionally. I have many flaws, Leo, but abandoning those under my care isn't one of them. You and your child are safe here. That hasn't changed. But then his expression hardened again, still returning to his tone. However, this development has changed my approach to Damien. He discarded you when you were carrying his child, threw you out without a second thought. That level of cruelty requires a special kind of punishment. Destroying his business isn't enough anymore. I'm going to dismantle everything he values, piece by piece, and he'll know exactly why. The protective fury in Romang's voice sent shivers down my spine. His revenge had transformed from business strategy to personal crusade, and I was the catalyst. That realization was both comforting and terrifying in equal measure. The weeks following my pregnancy revelation brought unexpected changes to my daily routine. Romang transformed from distant landlord to attentive guardian seemingly overnight. He ensured I attended every prenatal appointment, reviewed my meal plans with the chef personally, and even had the estate's gym equipment modified to include pregnancy-safe exercise options. What surprised me most was his presence. He began checking on me throughout the day, a knock at my door in the morning to ensure I'd taken my vitamins, appearing at lunch to verify I was eating properly, and late-night visits to ask if I needed anything. These interactions were brief and businesslike, but they represented a level of personal attention that went beyond simple obligation. I told myself it meant nothing. Roaming was simply protecting his investment, maintaining his property. But late at night, when I couldn't sleep due to early pregnancy discomfort, I'd hear his footsteps in the hallway outside my room, slow measured pacing as if he were standing guard. It was oddly comforting. One particular evening, around my 13th week of pregnancy, insomnia kept me restless despite my exhaustion. The baby had begun making its presence known through subtle flutters that felt like butterflies trapped inside me. Strange, wonderful, and slightly unnerving all at once. Unable to settle, I wandered downstairs in search of warm milk, which the pregnancy books claimed might help me sleep. I found Roaming in the living room, seated in his usual leather armchair before the fireplace, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. He glanced up when I entered, one eyebrow raising in silent question. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice rougher than usual at this late hour. "The baby keeps moving," I admitted, one hand unconsciously settling on my small but growing bump. "It's distracting." Something flickered across his face, curiosity, perhaps. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit if you'd like. Company might help." I settled into the chair, acutely aware of how domestic this felt. The fire cast dancing shadows across the room, and the silence between us was surprisingly comfortable. "What are you thinking about?" Roaming asked after several minutes, swirling his drink thoughtfully. "Everything. The baby, obviously. What happens after they're born? Whether I'm making the right choices." I paused, then added quietly, "Whether I'll regret this arrangement." "Do you regret it?" I considered the question carefully. "No. You've given me safety when I had none, protection when I desperately needed it. Whatever your motivations, I'm grateful for that. My motivations aren't as purely selfish as you might think." He set his glass down, giving me his full attention. "Revenge against Damien is certainly part of it. I won't pretend otherwise. But that's not the whole story." My pulse quickened. "Then what is?" Roaming leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You fascinated me from the moment we met at that gala months ago. You were different from the usual social climbers and gold diggers in Damien's circle. There was intelligence in your eyes, strength hidden beneath that omega compliance he demanded. I wanted to know more, but you were forbidden territory, his spouse, off limits. I hadn't expected such honesty. So when I showed up at your bar, desperate and alone, you saw an opportunity?" "An opportunity, yes, but not just for revenge." His green eyes held mine with unsettling intensity. "I saw someone brave enough to walk away from a toxic situation, courageous enough to protect what mattered most even at personal cost. That kind of strength is rare, Leo. It deserves to be protected, not exploited." He crept up my neck at the admiration in his voice. My omega instincts responded to his proximity and scent in ways that confused and frightened me. This wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to develop feelings for the dangerous alpha who'd offered me shelter. Roaming must have sensed my inner turmoil because he reached across the space between us, his fingers gently brushing my cheek. The touch sent electricity racing through my nervous system. "You're not just property to me," he said softly. "You never were. I need you to understand that." Before I could respond, before I could process what his words meant, he withdrew his hand and stood abruptly. "You should rest. Growing a human being is exhausting work." He left the room quickly, leaving me alone with my racing heart and confused emotions. I sat there for a long time, one hand on my belly, trying to understand what had just happened. The next morning brought unwelcome news. One of Roman's security team informed him during breakfast that Damien had been making inquiries about my whereabouts. His private investigators had been asking questions at various clinics and medical facilities around the city. "It's only a matter of time before he traces you here," Roming's head of security reported. "We intercepted communications suggesting his people spotted you and Mr. Vance at the private clinic last week." I felt the blood drain from my face. Roming noticed immediately, his expression hardening with protective fury. After dismissing his security chief, he turned to me. "Damien knows you're with me. He called this morning while you were still asleep." "What did he say?" My voice came out smaller than I'd intended. "He demanded I return his property immediately. He seems to believe he has some claim over you despite the divorce." Roming's tone dripped with contempt. I corrected that misunderstanding rather firmly. "He's going to cause trouble, isn't he?" "Almost certainly." Roming stood, radiating controlled menace. "But let him try. I've been building my empire for over a decade, Leo. Damien is a corporate businessman playing at power. He has no idea what real power looks like. And he's about to learn that lesson the hard way." True to Roming's prediction, trouble arrived the following day in the form of legal documents. Damien's attorneys had filed for emergency custody of the unborn child, claiming I was an unfit parent living with a known criminal. The paperwork was extensive and professionally prepared, clearly meant to intimidate. Roming barely glanced at it before handing the documents to his own legal team. "Handle this," he instructed them. "I want every accusation dismantled, every claim refuted with evidence, and pull together everything we have on Damien's illegal activities, the fraud, the embezzlement, the offshore accounts. If he wants to play dirty, we'll bury him." Watching him work was like observing a master strategist at a chessboard. Every move was calculated, every response measured for maximum impact. Within hours, his lawyers had filed countersuits citing abandonment and emotional cruelty, attaching evidence of Damien's extramarital affairs and financial crimes. But legal battles took time, and Damien was nothing if not impatient. 3 days after filing his custody claim, he made a more direct move. I was sleeping when the first gunshot shattered the night. The sound jolted me awake, heart pounding, momentarily disoriented. More shots followed, sharp cracks that echoed across the estate grounds. My bedroom window rattled from the percussion. Terror flooded my system. I scrambled out of bed, instinctively curling my arms around my belly in a protective gesture. My door burst open, and Roming appeared, dressed in black tactical gear, a handgun held with professional competence. "Stay calm and follow me immediately," he commanded, his voice cutting through my panic. "We're under attack." "What's happening?" I asked even as I hurried after him into the hallway. "Damien sent mercenaries. My security team is engaging them now, but I need you somewhere secure." He led me rapidly toward a section of the house I'd never explored before, his free hand gripping my wrist firmly. We descended into the basement through a hidden door disguised as a bookshelf. The underground passage was lit by emergency lighting, giving everything an eerie red glow. Roming moved with the confidence of someone who'd planned for exactly this scenario. At the end of the passage, he unlocked a reinforced steel door and pushed me gently inside. The room beyond was a safe room. Concrete walls, independent ventilation, supplies stocked for an extended stay. "Lock this behind me," Roming instructed. "Under no circumstances do you open it for anyone except me. The walls are soundproofed and reinforced. You'll be safe here." Fear gripped me. "Where are you going?" "To end this." His expression was grim. "Damien made a fatal mistake attacking my home. He needs to learn there are consequences for such stupidity." "Please be careful," I whispered, surprised by how much I meant it. Something softened in his eyes. He reached out and cupped my face briefly. "I always am. Keep yourself and the baby safe." Then he was gone, and I was alone in the reinforced silence, listening to my own heartbeat and praying he would return. Time moved differently in the safe room. Without windows or clocks, I had no way to gauge how long I'd been locked in the concrete-walled chamber. It could have been hours or merely minutes. The soundproofing was so complete that I couldn't hear any indication of what was happening above. No gunfire, no shouting, nothing but the quiet hum of the ventilation system. I sat on the single cot provided, arms wrapped protectively around my growing belly, trying to stay calm for the baby's sake. Panic wouldn't help anyone. Roman had prepared for this scenario, which meant he had contingency plans. I had to trust in his competence and experience. Still, worry nagged at me. What if Damien's mercenaries overwhelmed Roman's security? What if something happened to him? The thought of Roman injured or worse sent unexpected pain lancing through my chest. When had I started caring so deeply about his well-being? After what felt like an eternity, I heard the distinctive sound of the door's locking mechanism disengaging. I scrambled to my feet, heart racing, prepared to defend myself if necessary. But it was Roman who entered, and the relief that flooded through me was almost overwhelming. He looked like he'd been through hell. His tactical gear was dirt-stained. There was a nasty cut above his left eyebrow that had bled down the side of his face, and his knuckles were bruised and bloodied. But he was alive, upright, and moving under his own power. "It's over," he said simply. "The threat has been neutralized." I crossed the space between us without thinking and threw my arms around him, not caring about the dirt or blood. I just needed to feel that he was solid and real and safe. For a moment, he went rigid with surprise. Then his arms came up to hold me carefully, mindful of my condition. "You're all right," I breathed against his chest. I was so worried. "Takes more than hired thugs to put me down," he murmured, one hand stroking my hair in a surprisingly gentle gesture. "You're safe. That's what matters." We stood like that for several heartbeats before Roman gently extricated himself. "Come on, let's get you back upstairs. The estate is secure again." As we made our way back through the underground passage, Roman explained what had happened. Damien had hired a team of 6 mercenaries to breach the estate, likely with orders to retrieve me by force. Roman's security team had intercepted them at the perimeter, and the subsequent firefight had been brief but intense. 2 are in custody being questioned by my people, Roman said as we emerged back into the main house. 3 fled when they realized they were outmatched. 1 is dead. He made the mistake of trying to breach the main house. I shuddered at the casual way he discussed death, reminded once again of the violent world he inhabited, and Damien. Waiting to hear back from his hired help, I imagine. Roman's expression was grim. "You won't get that satisfaction. I've already contacted law enforcement through channels I control. Damien will be facing questions about attempted kidnapping and assault by morning." True enough, by the time dawn broke, news reports were already circulating about a failed attack on a private estate in the city's outskirts. Damien's name appeared in connection with the investigation within hours, thanks to statements from the captured mercenaries who were surprisingly willing to cooperate once Roman's interrogators made certain offers. The legal fallout was swift and merciless. Damien's custody claim evaporated immediately. Courts didn't look kindly on parents who hired armed men to kidnap pregnant Omegas. His business partners began distancing themselves publicly, afraid of being contaminated by association. The stocks Roman had been strategically undermining went into free fall. Within a week, Damien's empire was in ruins. His assets were frozen pending criminal investigation. His board of directors had voted him out of his own company, and he was facing serious prison time for a laundry list of charges ranging from fraud to attempted kidnapping. Roman kept me informed of every development, a grim satisfaction in his voice as he detailed each new blow to Damien's former life. "He's finished," Roman told me one evening as we reviewed the latest news. "Completely and utterly destroyed. He'll never pose a threat to you or your child again." I should have felt triumphant, but instead I felt hollow. Was it worth it? All this violence and destruction? Romang looked at me seriously. He threw you away like garbage when you needed him most. He tried to have you kidnapped at gunpoint. Yes, Leo, it was absolutely worth it. People like Damien need to learn that actions have consequences. He was right, of course. But the whole situation left me feeling drained and uncertain about the future. With Damien neutralized, what happens now? Our original deal was protection in exchange for information. That arrangement is fulfilled. I hesitated. Do I still have a place here? As if reading my thoughts, Romang stood and walked to where I sat on the living room couch. He'd been doing this more often lately, seeking me out in the evenings, sitting with me, talking about everything and nothing. It had become a ritual I found myself looking forward to. I need to tell you something, he said, his tone unusually serious. This arrangement between us, it started as a business transaction, a way for me to hurt Damien while providing you temporary shelter. My stomach dropped. Here it came. The dismissal, the end of my sanctuary. I understand. You fulfilled your end of our agreement, and let me finish. He sat beside me, closer than was strictly necessary. What I'm trying to say is that this stopped being temporary for me weeks ago. You've become part of my life, part of my daily routine, you and your child both. I don't want that to change. Hope fluttered in my chest, fragile and uncertain. What are you saying? I'm saying stay, not because of any deal or agreement, but because I want you here. Because somewhere along the way, protecting you stopped being about revenge and started being about, he paused, seeming to search for words. About caring for you. Actually caring, not just keeping you safe. Tears pricked my eyes. Romang. He reached out and cupped my face in both hands, his thumbs gently brushing away tears that had escaped. I know this is complicated. I know I'm not the safest choice or the easiest path forward, but I'm offering you a real home, Leo, for you and your child. If you want it. Instead of answering with words, I leaned forward and kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, testing. But then Romang's arms came around me, and he deepened the kiss, pouring into it all the emotion neither of us had quite managed to articulate. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. Romang rested his forehead against mine, careful of my growing belly between us. Is that a yes? He asked quietly. Yes, I whispered. It's a yes. To all of it. The future still held uncertainties. Raising a child, navigating life with a man who lived in the shadows, building something real from the ashes of revenge and desperation. But for the first time since my world had collapsed, I felt genuinely hopeful. Romang held me close as the fire crackled in the hearth, his hand resting protectively on my belly where our child, because it was our child now, in all the ways that mattered, was growing stronger each day. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, and that was enough. 5 months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Romang was there, holding my hand through every contraction, his calm presence grounding me when the pain threatened to overwhelm. When our son finally emerged, crying his fierce arrival into the world, Romang's eyes were wet with tears he didn't bother to hide. He's perfect, Romang whispered, cradling the baby in his arms with a tenderness that made my heart ache. Just like you. He has your eyes, I murmured, gazing at the dark green irises blinking up at us. Romang smiled, a real smile, full of wonder and joy. He has your stubbornness. I can already tell. We named him Alexander, Alex for short. Strong, like the man who would raise him. Hopeful, like the future we were building together. Damien was in prison, his empire reduced to ash and memory. He'd sent one letter, months ago, begging for forgiveness, asking to see his son. I'd burned it unread. Some doors, once closed, should never be reopened. The estate had changed over the months. It no longer felt cold and imposing. Mrs. Chun had helped me decorate the nursery in soft blues and yellows. The chef had learned to make my favorite comfort foods. The guard smiled when I passed, no longer seeing me as a stranger, but as part of the household. And Roaming had become my home. He still ran his empire from the shadows, still commanded fear and respect, still carried the weight of a dangerous life. But with me and Alex, he was different, softer, more human. He read bedtime stories in voices that made me laugh, changed diapers without complaint, and woke at 3 a.m. to soothe our son back to sleep while I rested. One evening, as I nursed Alex in the nursery, Romang appeared in the doorway. He leaned against the frame, watching us with an expression I'd come to recognize: awe, gratitude, and something deeper. "What?" I asked, smiling. "Nothing." He crossed the room and knelt beside the rocking chair, his hand coming to rest on Alex's tiny back. "I was just thinking about the day you walked into my bar, bedraggled, terrified, pregnant, and desperate enough to make a deal with a monster. You're not a monster. I was before you." He looked up at me, those green eyes soft in the lamplight. "You changed me, Leo. You and this little one. You gave me something I didn't know I was missing." "What's that?" "A reason to be better." He pressed a kiss to my forehead. "A home." Alex finished nursing and drifted off to sleep, his tiny fist curled against my chest. Romang lifted him carefully and settled him into the crib, then pulled me into his arms. "I love you," he said quietly. "I should have said it sooner, but I was afraid. Afraid you'd leave. Afraid I didn't deserve you. Afraid I'd ruin this like I've ruined everything else." "You haven't ruined anything." I reached up and touched his face. "And I love you too. I think I have for a long time. Maybe since that first night, when you offered me a place to stay and didn't ask for anything in return." "I asked for quite a lot," he reminded me. "You asked for information. You gave me safety. There's a difference." He kissed me then, low and deep and full of promise. When we finally separated, we were both smiling. "So," he said, his hand finding mine, "what happens now?" I looked around the nursery, at the crib where our son slept, the rocking chair where I'd spent countless hours, the window where moonlight streamed through, and at Roman standing beside me with patient eyes. "Now," I said, "we live happily ever after, or as close as we can get." Romang laughed, pulling me close. "I can live with that. I'm counting on it." Outside, the estate was quiet, the guards making their rounds, the security systems humming. The world beyond was still dangerous, still uncertain. But in this room, with this man and this child, I had found something I never expected. I had found love. I had found family. And I had found home. That Alexander's first birthday was a quiet affair. Romang had wanted to throw an extravagant celebration, the kind of party that would remind the world that the Vance family had a new heir. I'd argued for something smaller, more intimate. We compromised on a garden gathering with close associates and their families, a barbecue, and a cake shaped like a wolf. "He's going to destroy it," Romang observed, watching Alex at the cake with suspicious curiosity. "That's the point." Alex, now walking with wobbly determination, had his father's green eyes and my stubborn chin. He'd inherited Roman's scent, cedarwood and smoke, with a hint of something softer underneath that was entirely his own. The combination was already proving lethal. Even the household guards melted when he smiled. "He has you wrapped around his finger," I told Romang as Alex toddled toward him, arms outstretched. "He has everyone wrapped around his finger." Romang lifted our son and settled him on his hip. "That's how he'll survive in this world." I still worried about that, about raising a child in Romang's world of shadows and violence. But Romang had made changes over the past year. Legitimate businesses had expanded, illegal operations had been scaled back or moved further underground. He said it was for Alex, so our son could grow up without the weight of his father's sins. I believed him. I had to. The party wound down as evening approached. The last guests departed, and the staff began clearing away remnants of the celebration. Alex had fallen asleep in Roman's arms, his tiny face peaceful, one hand curled around his father's collar. "I have something for you," Roman said quietly, not looking at me. "Another gift? He already has more toys than he knows what to do with." "Not for him. For you." He shifted Alex carefully to one arm and reached into his jacket pocket. My heart stuttered when I saw the small velvet box. "Roman, I know we're not traditional." He opened the box, revealing a simple platinum band with a single diamond. "I know we started with a deal, not a promise. But you've given me everything, Leo. A home, a son, a reason to be better than I was." He knelt down on the grass, Alex still sleeping in his arms, and looked up at me with those green eyes that had once terrified me. "I'm not asking because I have to. I'm asking because I want to. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to watch Alex grow knowing his parents chose each other, not out of desperation, but out of love." Tears blurred my vision. "Roman, marry me, Leo. Not because of a deal, not because of revenge. Because I love you. Because you're my home." I dropped to my knees in front of him, cupped his face in my hands, and kissed him. Alex stirred slightly, made a soft sound, then settled back to sleep. "Yes," I whispered against his lips. "Yes, of course yes." He slid the ring onto my finger with trembling hands, then pulled me into his arms, careful not to crush Alex between us. We stayed like that as the sun set over the estate, the world quiet and golden and full of promise. "I love you," he said. "I love you too." The wedding was 2 months later, on a crisp autumn day. Roman had wanted something grand, but I'd insisted on small, just family and close friends. Mrs. Jung cried through the entire ceremony. The guards, who had become like family, wore their dress uniforms and stood at attention as we exchanged vows. Alex, now walking steadily, served as ring bearer. He'd practiced for weeks, walking down the makeshift aisle with a velvet pillow clutched to his chest. When he reached us, he looked up at Roman and said, clear as day, "Dada." The crowd erupted in cheers. Roman's composure cracked, just for a moment, and I saw tears in his eyes. "He called me Dada," Roman said later, still marveling. "He's been practicing," I admitted. "I may have helped." Roman pulled me close, mindful of the small bump that had recently appeared on my stomach. "Yes, another baby was on the way. Alex would have a sibling." "You're trying to give me a heart attack," Roman murmured. "You started this," I reminded him. "You proposed. Best decision I ever made." We stood together as the sun set, watching Alex chase fireflies across the lawn, his laughter echoing through the evening air. The future was still uncertain, still shadowed by the world Roman inhabited. But for this moment, for this breath, everything was perfect. Of course, peace never lasted long in Roman's world. 3 months after the wedding, a new threat emerged. Not from Damien. He was still in prison, his appeals denied, his empire in ashes. This threat came from outside, from a rival organization that had been watching Roman's rise with growing unease. "They want to test my boundaries," Roman explained over dinner, his expression grim. "They think my new domestic life has made me soft." "Has it?" He looked at me, at Alex, who was smearing mashed vegetables across his tray, and something softened in his eyes. "Yes, but that doesn't mean I'm weak. It means I have something worth protecting." The weeks that followed were tense. Roman increased security around the estate. Guards patrolled in shifts I'd never seen before. He came home later, smelling of gunpowder and tension, and fell into bed beside me without speaking. I didn't ask questions. I knew better. Instead, I held him, let him rest, and trusted that he would protect us. One night, he woke me with a gentle touch. "Leo, I need you to listen." I sat up, instantly alert. "What's wrong?" "Nothing is wrong, but I need you to know, if something happens to me, nothing is going to happen to you." I gripped his arm. "Don't talk like that. I have to." His voice was calm, but his eyes were serious. "The estate is yours. The accounts are in your name. Alex's trust is set up. My lawyers have standing orders to protect you both, no matter what. Roaming. I'm not planning to die, Leo, but I need you to be prepared, just in case. I kissed him then, hard and desperate, pouring every ounce of fear and love into it. When we finally separated, he pressed his forehead against mine. I'm not going anywhere, he said. I promised you forever. I intend to keep that promise. The crisis passed, as crises always did. The rival organization backed down when Roman's countermoves proved too costly. Business continued. The estate returned to its quiet rhythm. But something had changed. Roman held me tighter at night. He spent more time with Alex, reading to him, teaching him words, carrying him on his shoulders through the gardens. He was building memories, I realized, stockpiling moments against a future that might be shorter than he wanted. You're thinking about him, I said one evening, finding him alone in the nursery, watching Alex sleep. I'm thinking about all of it, he admitted. About what kind of father I want to be. About whether I can give him a normal life. You can give him a good life. That's what matters. Roman turned to me, his expression unreadable. And you? Are you happy, Leo? Truly happy. I crossed the room and took his hand. I have a home. I have a son. I have a man who loves me more than I ever thought possible. Yes, Roman, I'm happy. He pulled me into his arms and held me. Good. Because I'm not letting you go. I'm not asking you to. Our daughter, Elena, was born on a rainy spring morning. She had Roman's dark hair and my eyes, and she came into the world screaming with the fury of someone who intended to make her presence known. Alex, now too, was fascinated. He stood on tiptoe to peer into the bassinet, his expression serious. Baby, he announced. Yes, sweetheart, that's your sister. He considered this for a moment, then nodded solemnly. Okay. Roman laughed, a real laugh, full of joy. He approves. High praise. We settled into our new normal. Elena was easier than Alex had been. Calmer, more patient, content to watch the world from her father's arms while Alex demanded attention. The estate felt fuller, livelier, more like a home than a fortress. The guards had grown accustomed to children underfoot. Mrs. Chin had turned the kitchen into a production line of baby food and toddler snacks. Even the chef, who had once intimidated me, now asked Alex for his opinion on menu planning. You've changed this place, Roman said one evening, watching Alex chase fireflies across the lawn while Elena slept in my arms. We've changed it. Together. He kissed my temple. I never expected this. Any of it. Neither did I. But I'm glad. He wrapped his arm around my waist, and we watched our children play in the fading light. The future was still uncertain, still shadowed by the world Roman inhabited. But for this moment, for this breath, everything was perfect. On our second anniversary, Roman gave me a book. Not a new one, an old one, leather-bound, with yellowed pages and a familiar scent. What is this? I asked, opening it carefully. Your grandfather's journal. The one he kept before he died. I found it in storage. My hands trembled. My grandfather had raised me, had taught me to value my mind, had been my only ally in a family that saw me as currency. When he died, I thought his journals were lost. How did you find this? I have resources. Roman smiled, and I wanted to give you something that mattered. Something that reminds you where you came from and how far you've come. I opened the journal to a random page. My grandfather's familiar handwriting stared back at me. Leo is different. The pack doesn't understand him, but I do. His mind is his gift, not his weakness. Someday, someone will see that. Someday, he'll find the home he deserves. Tears streamed down my cheeks. Roman held me as I cried, not asking why, just letting me feel. I wish he could have met you, I said finally. He knew you. That's enough. Roman pressed a kiss to my hair. And he was right. You found your home. I looked at him, at this man who had started as a dangerous stranger, become a reluctant protector, and transformed into my partner, my lover, my family. Yes, I said. I did. We stood together as the stars emerged, Alex and Elena asleep upstairs, the estate quiet around us. The past was behind us, the betrayal, the fear, the desperation. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but bright. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid, because I had Roman. I had our children. I had a home. And I had finally learned that love wasn't about being useful. It was about being chosen, every single day.